Picture this. You go to sleep a millionaire, wake up with nothing. New catastrophe, no warning signs, just pure financial obliteration that destroyed fortunes overnight and plunged an entire nation into a decade of despair. This wasn't fiction. This was America in 1929. But here's the kicker. Everyone saw it coming, yet nobody wanted to believe it. Step back to 1922. The world had just survived the bloodiest war in history, and America was ready to party. The economy wasn't just growing, it was on financial steroids. Assembly lines churned out consumer goods like money-printing machines, cars, radios, refrigerators. Suddenly everyone could afford the American dream, or at least pretend they could. Here's where it gets interesting. Henry Ford's production revolution didn't just make cars affordable, it created the blueprint for modern capitalism. What once took half a day now happened in 90 minutes. Efficiency became the new gold rush, and every industry wanted in steel, oil, rubber. They all rode the wave of mass production prosperity. But while cities glittered with electric lights and jazz music, rural America was quietly drowning. Farmers who had made fortunes feeding Europe during the war suddenly faced rock-bottom prices. Their solution? Borrow money for new equipment. Classic mistake. Throwing good money after bad. They upgraded their tractors, but not their financial literacy. Meanwhile, urban Americans discovered their favorite new drug, debt. Welcome to the birth of consumer credit, where wanting something today meant you could have it today. Cars, appliances, even stocks, everything came with a payment plan. Banks handed out credit like candy at Halloween, and just like Halloween candy, it would make everyone sick later. But the real addiction was happening on Wall Street. The stock market became America's casino, where everyone thought they were the house. Margin buying let ordinary people control massive positions with tiny down payments. Buy $1,000 worth of stock with just $100 cash. Genius. What could go wrong? The warning signs were everywhere. But greed is a powerful anesthetic. When your barber starts giving you stock tips, when shoeshine boys are day trading, when elevator operators are discussing market fundamentals, that's not democratization of wealth. That's a bubble ready to burst. And between 1924 and 1929, stock prices quadrupled, not because companies were 4 times more valuable, but because everyone believed in the fairy tale of endless growth. Companies got creative with financial engineering. They created holding companies that owned holding companies that owned nothing substantial. It was like a Russian nesting doll made of pure speculation. Imagine building a skyscraper on a foundation of playing cards. Impressive until the wind starts blowing. Then came October 29th, 1929. Black Tuesday, the day the music died, and the bill came due. In a single day, the Dow didn't just fall. It collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. $14 billion evaporated. That's over $200 billion in today's money, vanishing faster than trust in a Ponzi scheme. Picture the New York Stock Exchange that day. Grown men weeping, phones ringing endlessly with panic, ticker tapes spitting out red numbers like blood from a wound. The American dream didn't just end, it exploded in everyone's face simultaneously. But here's the cruel irony. The crash was just the opening act. What followed was financial carnage on an unprecedented scale. Banks that had seemed solid as granite crumbled like sand. People who had trusted the system with their life savings watched everything disappear overnight. Bank runs spread like wildfire, with crowds gathering outside locked doors, demanding money that simply didn't exist anymore. The domino effect was ruthless. As American banks collapsed, they called in loans from Europe. The global financial system, already fragile from World War I, shattered completely. International trade didn't just slow down. It collapsed by 50% in 3 years. 50%. Imagine half of all global commerce vanishing because one country's bubble burst. By 1931, America looked like a completely different country. Unemployment hit 25%. 1 in 4 people who wanted to work couldn't find a job. Detroit, the symbol of American industrial might, watched its factories go silent. Production dropped by 75%. The machines that had built the American dream sat rusting in empty warehouses. Bread lines became as common as traffic lights. Mothers waited hours for a bowl of thin soup. Children fainted in school, not from boredom, but from hunger. This wasn't poverty. This was starvation in the world's richest nation. The suicide rate soared as desperation consumed hope. Newspapers couldn't keep up with the obituaries. Then nature decided to pile on. The Dust Bowl hit like biblical punishment, massive storms of dirt and despair that buried crops and suffocated livestock. Years of aggressive farming had stripped the land bare, and when the rains stopped, the earth itself turned against the people. Black blizzards blocked out the sun, filling homes with dust and hearts with hopelessness. Millions fled westward, everything they owned packed into broken-down cars, chasing rumors of work in California. But for most, California was just another mirage in a desert of broken dreams. President Hoover tried to maintain optimism, insisting the economy was fundamentally sound while millions sat at empty dinner tables. His name became synonymous with suffering. Hooverville's shantytowns, built from scraps. Hoover blankets, newspapers used for warmth. Hoover flags, empty pockets turned inside out. The breaking point came in 1932, when World War I veterans marched on Washington, desperately seeking early payment of their service bonuses. The government's response: tear gas and burned camps. America had turned its weapons on its own heroes, and the nation watched in horror. Then came Franklin Roosevelt with a simple but powerful message. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. But FDR didn't just offer words, he offered work. The Civilian Conservation Corps put young men to work, planting trees and building infrastructure. The Works Progress Administration hired millions to construct roads, bridges, and schools. People who had stood in bread lines now stood on construction sites, rebuilding both the nation and their dignity. Slowly, methodically, America began to heal. New regulations reigned in Wall Street's worst impulses. The FDIC protected people's savings. Social Security promised that Americans wouldn't have to work until they collapsed. These weren't just programs. They were promises that the government wouldn't abandon its people again. The Great Depression didn't end with a celebration. It ended with calloused hands and legislative safeguards, with a nation that had learned the hard way that endless growth is guaranteed, and that financial bubbles always, eventually, burst. But as America stood back up, few realized that an even greater challenge was already gathering on the horizon, one that would test not just their economy, but their very survival as a free nation. Thank you for watching Limitless. Help the channel, subscribe, and leave your like.